Stand in the middle of Trafalgar Square, and somewhere beneath your feet lies the skull of a hippopotamus. Not an escaped zoo animal, a wild one that waded through warm water where the traffic now runs. Death is supposed to keep things in their place. A desert animal belongs in the desert, a jungle predator in the jungle. But the ground keeps handing back bodies that break that rule. Creatures pulled from ice, stone, and frozen mud thousands of miles from anywhere they should have lived. Today, 6 animals found in the wrong place. Every one of them deeply unsettling. Here's the thing about a body in the wrong place. A single fossil is already a long shot. Most animals rot, get scattered by scavengers, and vanish without leaving a trace. But a body that ends up somewhere it should never have been carries a second message stacked on top of the first. It tells you the map you carry in your head is wrong. The world it died in does not match the world you're standing in. Ice used to be forest. A polar wasteland used to be a riverbank full of teeth. Some of these creatures were locked in stone, some in frozen mud. One of them is so intact it still has fur. The medium changes, but the wrongness is the same every time. An animal in a place that should have killed it, or that never should have contained it at all. And the only reason we know any of it is that the ground eventually gave the body back. Often by accident, often to someone who was looking for something else entirely. Let's start close to home. We begin under London. Across the last 2 centuries, as the foundations of the modern city were dug, cellars, sewers, the deep pits beneath grand buildings and railway lines, workers kept striking bone, not human bone. Something far larger and far stranger. From central London, from the gravels beneath streets you could walk today, came the remains of a hippopotamus. And near Trafalgar Square itself, the deposits gave up teeth and bone dated to around 120,000 years ago. These weren't some vanished dwarf species, either. They belonged to the same hippopotamus that lives in Africa now, a two-ton animal, one of the most dangerous on the continent. Its molars the size of your fist, resting in the mud under the fountains and the pigeons. This was the last interglacial, a warm pause between ice ages, when Britain was hotter than it is today. The Thames wasn't the tame gray river of postcards. It was a broad, braided waterway lined with marsh and woodland, and it teemed with animals that feel impossible standing in the drizzle. Hippos wallowed in the shallows. Straight-tusked elephants moved through the trees along the banks, and lions hunted the herds that came down to drink, in what is now the heart of one of the coldest-feeling capitals in Europe. Most of these finds came up during the building boom of the 1800s and 1900s, when crews cutting foundations and rail lines through the capital kept hitting the bones of a vanished menagerie, hippo, elephant, lion, and handing them to collectors and museums, where some of them still sit today. The bones survived because the animals died near water. Their bodies sank into river gravel and mud and were sealed there, waiting for a city to be raised on top and then dug away above their heads. But the disturbing part isn't just that they were here, it's why they left. That warm world didn't end because it was fragile in some special way. It ended the way these warm windows always end. The climate swung back, the ice returned, and everything was driven south or wiped out. And here's the quiet part. Nobody says out loud, we are living inside one of those warm windows right now. The hippos of London are a reminder that the familiar version of a place is temporary. Peel back 100,000 years, and the ground you trust becomes somewhere else entirely, with much bigger animals in it. And the further north you go, the wronger it gets. Now go to the top of the world. Ellesmere Island sits above the 78th parallel, deep inside the Canadian Arctic, a place of rock, snow, and months of unbroken winter darkness. It's one of the last landmasses before the pole. And in the frozen sediment of a site called the Files Leaf Bed, a researcher named Natalia Rybczynski recovered something that should not fit there at all. At first, it was almost nothing to look at. Around 30 splinters of a single leg bone, scattered across the ground, the kind of debris most people would step over. Reassembled with 3D laser scanning, the fragments formed the shin of an enormous animal. To find out what it was, the team did something that sounds closer to forensics than fossil hunting. They pulled ancient collagen, protein, out of the bone and read its molecular signature, a technique called collagen fingerprinting. Cold is the reason it worked? The deep freeze of the high Arctic had kept the protein readable for millions of years, and the signature came back a camel. Not a small early one, a giant, roughly a third larger than a modern dromedary, standing in the high Arctic 3.5 million years ago. There's a deeper twist buried in that. Camels didn't come from the deserts of the old world at all. The whole family first evolved in North America and only later crossed into Asia. This Arctic giant sat near the root of that story, proof that before camels ever saw a dune, they were animals of the cold and the trees. Now, the Arctic then was warmer than today, forested rather than frozen solid, part of a global warm phase. But it was still the Arctic, still locked in 6 months of darkness, still buried in snow through a long, brutal winter. And that reframes everything you think you know about a camel. The broad, flat feet we picture crossing sand may have begun as snowshoes. The hump of fat, a food store for a starving winter, not a scorching summer. The big eyes, for seeing in a world without sun for half the year. The desert camel, it seems, is really an Arctic survivor wearing the wrong reputation. Its whole body a set of tools for a frozen place we forgot it came from. But at least a camel is a herbivore. The next animal in the wrong place was built to kill. Head to Greenland. Today, Jameson Land in the east of the island is a cold, wind-scoured expanse of Arctic tundra, snow, and ice. A place you associate with muskoxen and polar research stations. But dig into its ancient river and lake sediments, and you drop back to the late Triassic, around 215 million years ago, into a world where all the continents were still fused into the supercontinent Pangaea, and Greenland sat pressed against what is now Europe, far warmer and far lower on the map. And there, you find the remains of a predator that stops you cold. Its name is Mystriosuchus alaroch, described only recently, and if you saw it in life, you would swear it was a crocodile. Long, armored body, powerful tail, jaws lined with teeth. But it isn't a crocodile. It belongs to a group called Phytosaurs, crocodile-shaped hunters only distantly related to the real thing. Real crocodiles hadn't taken over the rivers yet? These animals got there first, and evolved the same terrifying shape independently. An entirely separate lineage arriving at the identical design. Nature built the ambush predator, threw it away, and built it again. The tell is in the skull. Its nostrils weren't at the tip of the snout. They'd migrated back, up near the eyes. That's an ambush animal's face. The kind that lies just beneath the surface of the water with only its eyes and a breathing slit breaking the surface, waiting for something to come down to drink. The site didn't preserve one lost stray. It held the remains of at least 4 individuals, adults and juveniles together, a resident population, a whole community of submerged hunters, thriving in warm, seasonal lakes where Greenland now offers nothing but frozen ground. Picture it, still black water, a long snout drifting without a ripple, patient. The fact that the juveniles are there at all means this was a breeding ground. Young phytosaurs growing up in those waters, learning to lie still and wait. Now picture the exact same coordinates today. Buried under snow half the year, the lake's long gone. The animal is gone with them, but the horror of that design outlasted the place that made it. And there was one continent even more wrong for a predator to call home. Now go as far south as land will take you, to Antarctica. In the brief austral summer of 1990 and 91, a team led by paleontologist William Hammer was working high on Mount Kirkpatrick in the Transantarctic Mountains, roughly 640 kilometers from the South Pole. They weren't brushing loose fossils out of soft dirt. They were quarrying bone out of frozen mountain rock, thousands of meters up, in one of the most hostile places any fossil hunter has ever worked. What they pulled free was the most complete meat-eating dinosaur ever found on the continent. They named it Cryolophosaurus, the frozen crested lizard. It was a genuine apex predator, 6 to 7 meters long even as a not yet fully grown animal, with a strange comb-like crest running side to side across the top of its head, rising up near the eyes rather than pointing forward. Too thin and delicate to be a weapon, the crest was almost certainly for show, for attracting mates or warning rivals, which means this thing was performing to its own kind at the bottom of the world. Its pompadour earned it a nickname, Elvisaurus. It lived in the early Jurassic, around 190 million years ago, an early, primitive member of the big predatory line, hunting long before the famous giants of later ages. And it wasn't alone. The same frozen rock has given up other animals that shared its world, hints of a whole lost food chain. Getting any of it out meant hauling rock saws and jackhammers up a mountain and running generators in air thin enough to make every hour of work a fight. Here's the part that unsettles. It did not live on ice. Back then, Antarctica sat far south, yes, but it was warm, temperate, and frost-free, covered in forest and open woodland, closer to southern Chile than to the white desert it became. So this animal hunted through trees, in mild air, near the bottom of the world, and then the whole continent slowly drifted over the pole, cooled, and froze solid around its grave. Its bones didn't travel to the ice came to them. A top predator, sealed inside what would become the coldest, driest desert on Earth. And the strangest lives of all belonged to animals that stayed in the far north on purpose, and raised their children in the dark. Return to the Arctic, to the north slope of Alaska, where the Colville River cuts through a rock layer called the Prince Creek Formation. Around 69 million years ago, at the very end of the age of dinosaurs, this was land at an extreme northern latitude, well inside what would be the Arctic Circle. and it was home to herds of duck-billed dinosaurs, plant eaters first given the name Ugrunaluk, though some researchers now argue those particular bones belong to young Edmontosaurus. The naming can be debated, what the rock records cannot. Because this far north, the animals face something no dinosaur is supposed to have endured: months of true polar winter, darkness for weeks on end, falling temperatures, almost certainly snow. And they did not migrate thousands of miles away from it. The evidence says they stayed put and toughed it out. That points to animals that ran warm and stayed active in the cold rather than shutting down, which for a dinosaur is a quietly radical idea. Among the bones are the remains of the very young, hatchlings and newly hatched juveniles too small to have made any long journey, meaning these dinosaurs were nesting here, laying eggs and raising babies through the seasons at the edge of the world. Generation after generation, born into the cold and the dark, in an ecosystem that even had its own polar tyrannosaur hunting through the gloom. We still don't fully understand how they did it, how a duck-billed dinosaur got through 4 months without sunlight, without the plants it fed on, without freezing. And there's a colder detail still. One site, the Liscombe bone bed, holds more than 6,000 bones, overwhelmingly from young animals of a similar age. A herd of juveniles that appears to have died together, all at once, most likely swept up and buried by a sudden flood. Thousands of children, gone in a single moment, in a place that spends half its life in freezing night. It is one of the loneliest scenes in all of paleontology. But the most disturbing body in the wrong place isn't a fossil at all. It still has its face. Come back to our own age, the last ice age, and to the frozen north of Beringia, the lost land that once joined Alaska, the Yukon, and Siberia into a single cold world. Lions lived here. Real lions. Big cats prowling the freezing steppe alongside mammoths and wild horses. In the Yukon and Alaska, it was the American lion, one of the largest cats that has ever existed, around a quarter bigger than a modern African lion, a machine for pulling down Ice Age giants. Across the land bridge in Siberia stalked its close cousin, the cave lion. We picture lions on hot golden savanna, panting in the heat. These ones hunted at the edge of the glaciers, in air that could kill you. For a long time, we knew them only from scattered bones and a few ancient cave paintings. And then the permafrost gave one back whole. In the Siberian region of Yakutia, mammoth tusk hunters cutting into the frozen ground in search of ivory found a lion cub. Then, close by, a second. They had died as tiny animals, only a month or two old. One around 28,000 years ago, the other more than 40,000. And they had not rotted. The cold had held them so completely that the fur was still there. The skin, the teeth, the tiny claws, the internal organs, and the whiskers, still standing out stiff from the muzzle. Scans revealed a skeleton and soft tissue almost exactly as they were the day the cubs died, probably when a den collapsed or the ground gave way and buried them in an instant. One of them has been called, plainly, the best preserved Ice Age animal ever found, better than any mammoth. Think about what that means for a second. Everything's soft. Everything that normally disappears in the first weeks after death is still there on this cub, held in place by nothing but cold. You are not looking at a skeleton on a stand. You are looking at a cub that looks like it's sleeping, thawing out of a place that is now empty, frozen waste, tens of thousands of years after it stopped breathing, its DNA still locked inside it, in an age when we've started to wonder aloud what we might do with genes that intact. A predator we file under sun and heat, curled in the ice, with its face intact, waiting to be found. Which leaves the question that should follow you out of here. Almost none of these were discovered on purpose. A camel came out of the Arctic as 30 splinters someone nearly walked past. A predator came out of a mountain near the South Pole, cut free with power tools in air too thin to breathe easily. A herd of dinosaur children turned up in the wall of an Arctic river. And a lion cub with its whiskers still attached came out of the melting ground at the hands of people hunting for ivory. The map in your head, where things belong, where they could never survive, has been wrong the whole time. And the ground is giving up more of the evidence all the time. Because the permafrost that has kept these bodies frozen is now thawing faster than anyone can dig. Every warm season, more of it slumps into mud, and more of what it was hiding slides into the light. Bodies that have been waiting tens of thousands, even millions of years, in exactly the places they were never supposed to be. So the real thing to sit with isn't what we've already pulled out of the ice. It's what's still down there, in the wrong place, in the dark, and how much of it the thaw is about to hand back to us. If a body that should not exist is your kind of unsettling, stay with the channel. There's always another one coming out of the ground.